Welcome to Write Along, a group of writers who meet to inspire, support, and educate each other. Usually we meet in person the first Thursday of the month in Coronado, Panama, but today we're online with our guest authors, Nicola Davison and Lana Shupe, who will be sharing their experiences on traditional publishing. Hi, Nicola. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us, Lana. We appreciate you being here with us.
Hi, Lana.
If you haven't done so already, participants are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat, saying where they're from and what they write. If you write your questions in the chat, we'll pause to answer them as we go along. Linda, if you wouldn't mind introducing our guest today.
I would absolutely love to. It's my pleasure. I was so fortunate to meet both of these talented women this April on my Cross Canada book tour. And the first lady that I met was Lana, and I was in Calgary for the book signing at Crowfoot Chapters, where she had worked at one point. And I'd only spoke to her on online, so I hadn't seen her. I didn't know really who I was expecting. And as soon as she walked into the store, it was like a light went on. That's kind of radiant personality she has. And as she walked towards me, I was just like, oh, I wonder if this could be her. And she introduced herself and just, she was so supportive, and it just really made my day and made the whole nervousness of being at an author signing, one of my first, just evaporate. So I've been following her since, and it was really exciting watching her whole journey. She even her Facebook posts are well written, and watching her journey as she released her children's book, The Lonely Little Lighthouse, has just been so wonderful. So I'm going to read her bio, which I think is going to be included, but I'll just read it out. So while I was growing up, I was a reader of books. When I grew up, I became a teacher. In my classroom, I was a reader of books and a teller of tales. Then I married a man who loved books and telling tales as much as I did. Our house became full of books, collected while traveling the world together, visiting bookshops. Then I became a mother, and I read lots of books to my 3 very own children. Then those 3 children grew up, and now I'm a writer of words that are being put into books. I love writing words and making books and sharing the joy of reading. So we're also fortunate that you love this, Lana, and thank you for being here. I will go ahead and introduce Nicola. So I met Nicola. Nicola is multi-talented individual, as many creatives are. And I actually didn't know when I first met her that she was a writer. I had gotten her information from my publisher to do my photo shoot while I was in Halifax as part of this tour. And she is an amazing photographer. And she just showed up with this beautiful, easy nature and gentle smile. And I was so relaxed and really had a great time getting my photo taken, which let's face it, no one really usually enjoys that. So it was lovely. And then I found out that she was a writer, and I saw signs at my chapters signings when I was in Halifax, promoting her upcoming. So I started following her, and I was just blown away by her ability to really write suspenseful, exquisitely crafted books. And I saw her interview with my publisher, Anne O'Connell. And so now her books are on my list of must-reads, which I think is over 200 books now. So it's not easy, but hey, that's a difficult problem that I don't mind having. So I'm just going to read you her bio. Nicola Davison is a professional photographer and the author of In the Wake and Decoding Dot Grey. Her first novel won the 2019 Margaret and John Savage First Book Award, the Miramichi Reader's Very Best Book Award, and was a finalist for the Dartmouth Book Award. Decoding Dot Grey is currently in the running for the White Pine Award. That's a lot of awards. I'm impressed. Nicola is a member of the Writers' Union of Canada and the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia. In 2016, she completed the Alistair Macleod Mentorship Program. polishing off the umpteenth draft of her first novel with her mentor, Carol Bruneau. Born in Nova Scotia, she has lived in too many places and done just enough world traveling to appreciate home. She lives in Dartmouth with her boat crazy family and delightfully stubborn Basset Hound. So Nicola, welcome. I'm so delighted that you've accepted to be a presenter today. And hopefully your sound.
There, now, can you hear me? You can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
It's 1 out of
not all of
2.
it. Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. And that was a wonderful day of photos with you and your husband.
It was.
I
I'm
enjoyed
so pleased with how they turned out too.
Yay. Well,
Really
you're an
nice.
easy subject, must say.
All right, let's rename this compliment presentation.
The love session.
Yeah, the love session.
Thank you for the introduction. It was lovely, Linda.
You're welcome. I just love what you do and thrilled that I got to meet you and that we're staying connected through this crazy internet. Yeah. So should I get started? Everybody ready? The first question is, will you please share a little about your own unique writing and publication journey? So Nicola, do you want to kick that off, please?
Oh, sure. So I think like a lot of people that start writing, I always have written to myself just to kind of make sense of the world. And I didn't share a lot of that publicly until sometime in my 30s when I was working at a developer's office and there was a lack of newsletter. And so I started putting together this newsletter, but I didn't make it just about the corporate stuff going on. I started holding word contests and inviting people in for goofy interviews, and it became the kind of thing that was shared outside of the company. So people started encouraging me to write at that point. And I didn't follow up on that. I started a blog. So I blogged for years, knowing that I wanted to write more, knowing that fiction was something I wanted to try, but I had no idea how to start writing fiction. So when I turned about 42, my sister and I were having a glass of wine, and she said, what was the one thing I regretted not doing? And writing was the thing. And I think my husband overheard the conversation, and he signed me up for a workshop with Donna Morrissey. So I took this workshop, which was entitled something like using parts of your life to write a story. And it was a 6-week workshop. There was quite a few people in it. And Donna had us writing something and sharing it with the crowd within an hour. So I sat down and did a writing exercise and stood up and shared it. I was sweating and pink and shaking, but it was my first time sharing anything. And I got really good feedback from it. And I think that makes such a difference when your peers can give you feedback. So from there, from that very first workshop, I started writing my first novel. And I went through several drafts of that. I went to a lot of workshops, and I joined 2 or maybe even 3 writing circles. So I was workshopping scenes as I went. And is everybody still with me? The screen is frozen. Yes. Okay, good. And so I had quite a big manuscript after about a year or 2, and I decided to apply for the Alistair Macleod Mentorship Program, which is a wonderful mentorship program through the Writers Federation of Nova Scotia. I was rejected on the first time, and so I tried again because I was encouraged that my application was good, but they weren't quite ready for it that year. So I went again the following year, and I was accepted. And Carol Bruneau, who is a wonderful literary writer and teacher of writing, was my mentor. And that, I think, is the thing that has made the biggest difference in my writing career, is that I worked with her for 5 months intensively on my novel. And she talked to me about all the things to do with publishing. So, how to pitch my book, what kind of readings to choose, what to realistically expect once my book was published. And then, of course, having had a mentor and having the manuscript so carefully sculpted by another author made it that much easier to get it accepted by Nimbus, which is the biggest publisher in Atlantic Canada. Lana's publisher too. So that was my journey to getting that first book published. And of course, I'll talk some more about that, more of those aspects of it later on. I don't want to get in front of Lana, who probably has some interesting things to tell us too.
So my journey is a little different than Nicola's. I am the author of the children's picture book, The Lonely Little Lighthouse. And how it started, I've always kind of written. I've had journals since I was a little girl, you know, the journals with the little lock and key, and I kept that by my bed and hid it from my mom and, you know, all those great things. And always was a storyteller, always was a teacher. And then a few years ago, I had a little Westie. His name was Thunder, but I called him my wee Scotsman. And he and I went for walks, and I started posting about them on Facebook, about my walks with my wee Scotsman and what we saw, and kind of told it from his perspective. And I did that on Facebook, and I got such amazing feedback. It was so rewarding to get the feedback. And like Nicola, that feedback is so important, and it's so wonderful that you are all part of a writing group. It's something that's my 2023 goal. One of my 2023 goals is to become part of a writing group. So feeling particularly homesick for Nova Scotia, which is where I'm from. I now live in Alberta in Canada. I got to thinking about my hometown and about this wonderful story about the lighthouse near where I grew up and where I used to play as a kid, and where my husband and I took our kids. And so I said, I'm going to start a little story for my own children about the history. And then it morphed. And then I thought, this could be a book. I think this could be a book. I don't know why in my wildest dreams I thought I could ever write a book. But anyway, and I had been keeping in touch with the people at Read by the Sea in River John, Nova Scotia. And it is the most fantastic little literary festival in Nova Scotia with an amazing group of volunteers. And they had a segment during their weekend festival that was called Pitch the Publisher. And they invited publishers from four or five different companies to come in. And you had 3 minutes to pitch your story in front of this group of publishers. And like Nicola, with all the sweat pouring down and the nerves, and my hands were shaking, and I'm sure my voice was shaking, I read my 3-minute pitch that took way longer than 3 minutes to finally hone down to 3 minutes. And the response was immediate and gratifying, and everyone thought it was such a great story. It wasn't picked up by a publisher there, but I was encouraged to drop it off at the office of Nimbus in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which I did. I left it on the desk at the front desk, and thankfully, several months later, I got a call from the amazing editor, Whitney Moran at Nimbus, and they said they would like to publish my story. So yes, it was an absolutely lovely journey, and working with Whitney, which we can talk about later. But and now I have another book coming out this year. It's a children's chapter book with another publishing company in Newfoundland, actually. And the journey there was I had this experience on one of my travels with my husband. We met this really quirky, cute couple at a bed and breakfast that we stayed at. And something that the gentleman said kind of piqued something for me. And my husband said, there's a story there. You have to write it. And so once again, sat down thinking, I can't write a book. And worked with this book and sent it to the publisher in Newfoundland. And the rest is history. We've got another book in the works. So it's been wonderful.
Oh, that's fabulous. So thank you for that. Nadine, were you going to ask if anyone had any questions about those first two responses?
So far, there are no questions in the chat. So if you want to go ahead with the
Okay.
next question, and we invite you to ask questions as we go along, and we'll get to those.
Perfect. Okay, well, the next question was, what were the positives of your experience publishing with a traditional publisher? So, Nicola, if you want to start.
Sure. Let me see. The first thing is when you're actually accepted, because as you probably know, you can send your manuscript out to many publishers and agents and get nothing back for months. So I sent my first novel out to 3 or 4 publishers. I think I had 1 rejection, and the other ones hadn't gotten back to me, but Nimbus got back to me. And just hearing that it had been accepted was a big moment in my life, because it means that the book is good enough. It's seen to have potential. So I think I needed that feedback. So that was a big one for me, is just that a group of people who know their stuff said, okay, this is an author that we can work with. So that's one of the positives for it for me. The next is that they regularly work with editors. So they picked a wonderful editor for me. She wasn't local. She used to work in this area, but she is in BC. And she was really careful with all the details of the book. And I think she made it a much stronger book than it was to begin with. Because even though I had been through the mentorship program and I'd worked hard on it, and I had 2 other beta readers of the book give me feedback, I'd gone through quite a bit of work with it, but I still knew it was, I think it was 109,000 words, and they wanted to pare it down to 90,000 words. So that's the first thing usually with a first novel at a publisher, is they want you between 80 and 90,000 words. So that sounds like a daunting task, but I knew that it would make it a stronger book. So it was the editor that really guided me on where the strengths in the book were and what I needed to strengthen. So that was a wonderful experience. I couldn't wait to work with somebody who could give me that kind of feedback. So that's a good thing, is getting a great editor. When you work with a publisher, at least for novels, they create an advanced review copy. And with my first novel, I'm not sure how many they created, maybe 30 or 40, but I was invited to do an author talk really early on. And my arcs were passed out to people in the publishing industry, libraries, and so on. So they get their hands on your book and then can provide feedback and blurbs for the covers. So I don't think you can, maybe you can do that as a self-published author, but it's a nice little bonus when you're working with a publisher that they do that kind of thing. And they have access to other authors as well that you may not know that might be a good fit for your kind of writing, who can give a blurb for the book that may connect with readers that are in your marketing plan. And there's also this kind of sense of team behind you when you're working with a publisher. I know that as a self-published author, you probably hire that team, but with a publisher, you've got the person that's going to be designing the cover, you've got your editor, you've got your proofreaders, you've got your publicist. We have 2 publicists at Nimbus, one who is here in the region and one who's on Ontario. So she kind of handles the rest of Canada. And also they submit your book to awards. So that's something I don't need to worry about. And I had no idea how to go about that with my first book anyway. So I was delighted when I found out that it was shortlisted for a couple of awards, because I wouldn't have known when to submit, which ones to submit to, and all of that. And also I think you're eligible for different awards too when you have a publisher. They also pay expenses for some promotions. So with that first novel, I was sent to the Toronto International Festival of Authors, which was a big deal. And I was there for 5 days, and I got to go to lots of other author readings and panel discussions and so on, and appear on stage and do my own reading. So that was felt like a rock star for a little bit, although definitely imposter syndrome because it was my first novel and I really didn't feel deserving. But they do things like that. So they'll send you to events, festivals, and so on, and make sure that you're in the right category for your particular kind of writing. And then you also get teamed with authors at signing events. So Nimbus, they create sometimes their own signing events. So there might be 20 or 30 authors there, which draws more people to come and see you. But also you're not sitting alone at that signing table. I know everybody who's published has had the experience of sitting at that signing table, and it is a very lonely place, especially if you don't have a salesperson inside you. If you're not ready to sort of wave your book in the air and try to invite people over, it's a lot easier when you can be in an event like that. So they will do that. They will arrange for you to do signings as well. And there's also some guidance on where your book fits in the market, because certainly with my first book, I just wrote it and I didn't know for sure that it would be published. I wrote it to teach myself how to write a novel. So I wasn't thinking about, is this a suspense or is this literary fiction? I had a really vague idea of where it would fit, but the publisher, of course, has to go through that process, and you can talk to that marketing team about, what are the main points you can discuss that are of interest to the readers you want to connect with. And as far as the marketing of the book goes, when I sat down to fill out my contract for the first time, they assured me that I only had to do what I was comfortable with doing. So if I was scared to death of public speaking, and I was at the time, then I didn't have to do any of that. But I still agreed to do everything possible because I knew that I wouldn't know for sure what I liked doing until I'd actually tried it. And I wouldn't know what I was successful at doing until I actually tried it. So I said yes to everything. I did things like speak to a university classroom, and that was really intimidating. I went to high schools. I did readings on stage, and I discovered that the things that were probably the most successful for me has been doing things like workshops and book clubs where I can sit and just like this, talk to other people that are interested in books. And that made a better connection than sitting at a signing table. Anyway, so those are my sort of list of things that I've found really successful. And I was really happy to have that question from you, because there are times when my husband would say, well, what does the publisher really do? And when I sat down and made the list, I thought, you know what, they do a lot more than I thought they did. So it was affirming, I would say. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds really, really supportive and like a very positive experience. Thank you, Nicola.
So Nicola and I share the same publisher, so we have some of the same experiences. I too was paired with an amazing editor. My typical picture book is between 900 and 1,000 words. Mine was close to 1,000, and we pared it down to about 920. And that was due to the amazing editing job there. One of the things that comes with a picture book, I couldn't draw a stick figure to save my life. So the publisher chose the illustrator for my picture book. And in my opinion, they couldn't have chosen a better illustrator. She did an amazing job of bringing my words to life in pictures. And I'm so grateful to the publisher for that. The other thing that I would never have thought of was the publishing company, Nimbus. They thought that a great addition to the picture book would be a history of lighthouses. And so they asked me to write about a 250-word little section for the back of the book. And they thought it would be a great marketing opportunity for schools if we had that, history of the lighthouses, and which I never, ever would have thought to do. But that came from working with a publisher who knew how to market or knew how to get books where they needed to go. Like Nicola, there were advanced reader copies, so promotions came out of that. wrote an amazing article about the book. And I'm forever grateful to her. Hi, Sarah. So there was that, and that was something that the publisher did, sent out the ARCs for, to teachers and librarians prior to the publishing date. I also received, like Nicola, received a questionnaire prior to publication asking, like Nicola said, what I was comfortable doing for promotion, what was my absolute I would never want to do, never want to participate in, how willing was I to, go above and beyond to promote. And that questionnaire was great because it got me thinking about, some of the things involved in the promotion of the book that I had just frankly never thought about as a first-time author. Just trying to think of other things. It from start to finish, it was a positive experience. There was never once, even during the editing process, even though I felt, oh boy, should I be sticking to my guns on certain parts of the story? I was never felt like I couldn't do that. And even the editing suggestions that were made, it was made clear to me that if I didn't agree with them, there was a lot of back and forth. It was, here's what we suggest. But take it with a grain of salt, think about it for a little bit and come back to us. And every one of the edits, and there weren't that many, I feel grateful about, every one of the edits made that story better. I felt that every edit, every suggestion that was made was valuable for the story, and it didn't take anything away from my original manuscript. And it was just an excellent experience from start to finish as far as that. And funny, Nicola said about imposter syndrome. I still, the book came out in July. I still, when someone says, oh, here's the author, I still look behind me to see who they're talking about, because I think it can't possibly be me. I can't possibly be an author. So, and that's kind of my journey. The journey for the other book was a little bit more interesting. So I submitted it to, another word of advice I have for you if submitting traditionally is to really research who the publishing company that you're submitting to, know what they publish, what they don't publish, and I know you all know that, but I can't make that anymore. So the second book, I actually pitched it to the publisher as a picture book, and the publisher, the editor, she's amazing. She loved the story, but she didn't want it as a picture book. She wanted me to expand it. So it was a whole new, wonderful experience with her as well, with this publishing company, which is Running the Goat Books and Broadsides in Newfoundland. And she worked with me for months to take it from a picture book, which is 900 words, to a chapter book for young readers, 6 to 8 year olds, that's significantly more words, which I can talk a lot, but writing anyway. So it got to that point, and then she, as soon as we had it where she wanted it, she accepted it, sent me a contract, and the rest is history. It's going to be published this year. So once again, a very important lesson for me was, yes, I thought it was a picture book, but thankfully someone else saw it in a different format, and I'm super thrilled about the new format. So definitely two very positive experiences with traditional publishers.
Okay, so we do have a few questions. First of all, I'll start with Celia's, and I think this one relates to Lana's when she said that she was asked to drop off her manuscripts. So Celia, I think that's what you meant. And she's asking, did you drop off a hard copy or did you send a digital file?
This was actually, I actually dropped off a hard copy because that was what we were asked to submit at Pitch the Publisher. At the Pitch the Publisher at Read by the Sea, we were asked to have a bio and a cover letter and the actual physical, printed out version. So I did drop off a hard copy, and that was in 2019. So, since then, I know the publisher has gone, absolutely, their submissions are all done online.
Okay, and I think this question is for Nicola. It's from John Gaver. And he's saying, doesn't the word length change for each genre? Because from what I've read, the first time science fiction books are said to require 100,000 to 110,000 words, and nonfiction varies based on subject matter. So I think that's for you, Lana, because you were referencing novel length works.
Yeah, with my publisher, certainly with fiction, that's what they're looking for a first time novel. And it is something that I'd researched pretty heavily for word count, 80 to 90,000 words on that first novel, because it's a business partnership. And I think that they want to keep their expenses under control. That's my guess. But you're right, sci-fi is usually longer, fantasy as well. So my publisher doesn't typically publish that kind of book. That said, the YA authors sometimes do kind of have fantasy as part of it, but they tend to be around, the book lengths seem to be 275 pages or so, which is in about that word count. Yeah. And I'm sure it varies from publisher to publisher. Yeah.
Okay, and Sarah Butland has asked, how much say did you both have with respect to your covers? Nicola, do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, so it was very different. My first book, because I'm a photographer, I went out and I shot some pictures that I thought would work for the cover, and did a very rough layout just to give them an idea, because they do ask you if you have any ideas. And they said, thank you very much. And when they came back, it was a completely different thing, nothing to do with anything I'd given them. And the only option I was given for changes was the color of the font, not the font itself, just the color. So I could choose between white, blue, or red. I think that was about it. And I just went with what they suggested because I, was brand new at it. But I never really loved the cover. It's a picture of a wave. That's it. And then on my most recent novel, they wanted to market this one as a young adult novel. And I really like illustrated covers. So, and I really like blue. So I pulled a bunch of stock images and illustrations, and again, did a layout for them that I would like and I told them it's just for them to base it on. And they came back again with a cover that they loved. And I just had a visceral reaction to it. I did not like it at all. It wasn't the colors. It was nothing. It was the only thing that they had done was to take a crow, which I wanted on the cover, and some Morse code. So it's very different from what we ended up at. But I went back and sent them my ideas, and we came to a compromise. So I'm really, really happy with the cover that we came up with. And you can kind of see it over my shoulder. That's my book cover with Morse code and a crow and so on. So I think I was just a little too shy on the first cover. I think that you can have influence over your cover if you want to. I think if you do it respectfully, and you can reach a compromise. But yeah, that first book, I kind of regret that I didn't push a little bit more, but it still is a very nice cover. It's just not quite what I had in mind. Yeah.
So for me, it's a little different. With Nimbus, I had very little say in the cover. I did get to see the cover before it went to print, and I did get to say whether I liked it. Thankfully, I loved the cover and was very pleased. And I'm not an artist at all, so was super pleased about that. But talking to other children's book authors who have published traditionally, they had very little say as well over their covers. They really, the publisher was. And with my second book, the one that's coming out this year, I did have a little more say. It was a little bit different. But once again, the cover, the first look at the cover that I got was so spectacular. I couldn't have changed anything differently. I can hardly wait till everyone gets to see the cover. It's just amazing. But my talking to other authors of picture books, you really don't get that much say, I think, until you've, published 1 million books with that publisher, and then they might listen to you. But, they certainly, I don't think they would intentionally, if you said, oh, like Nicola said, this visceral reaction, if you had a visceral reaction to it and you said, oh my gosh, I can't possibly promote this book, even though it's mine, because I hate the cover, I think they would definitely be receptive to what you had to say. Whether they went with it or not would be a totally different experience, but yeah.
Okay, Celia is asking, with Nimbus, do you need to live in Canada or be Canadian to submit?
Nimbus, it's my understanding that Nimbus really wants to promote Atlantic Canadian authors and Atlantic Canadian stories. And if you look at their catalog, you will see that they do publish stories from the States and from around the world, but their focus is mainly on Atlantic Canadian authors and stories. And they have such a backlog. They just recently had a submission period, and it was a very short period of time. It was a month, I think. And so, you have to keep kind of going back to their site. But once again, my word of advice is to check the catalog and to see if the story that you're writing or the story that you're working on would fit with others that they've published.
Okay, Greg is asking, would you be able to contract your own cover art?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's a matter of looking at going online. And I have a very good friend here in Calgary who is a self-published author of children's books, and she's got some chapter books as well. She's done all her contracting, and I can certainly put you in touch with her illustrator, who is phenomenal. But she did a lot of research. She talked to a lot of illustrators, asked them about their process and, cost and all of that. But definitely, you can definitely contract your own cover. Oh, sorry, you mean for the publisher?
Yes.
Sorry. Early. No, you cannot. You must go with the publishers. Sorry, that was a long.
No, it's helpful information.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then Greg is also asking, what was the time frame from being picked up by a publisher to publication?
For my own, it's 18 months. That's what it is for a novel. I'm not sure if it's the same for children's books.
It wasn't for me. It was, I submitted in 2019 and it was published in 2022. So 3 years. I also have a picture book coming out with Nimbus, a second one in 2024. So it's 2 years now. I was just accepted this year. And we haven't decided on an illustrator yet, but it is slated to come out in their fall 2024 catalog. So 2 to 3 years, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from other children's books authors.
Okay, Linda, we're back to you to ask our next question.
All right, great. So the next question is, what were the opposite of positive? What were the challenges, if any, of publishing traditionally? Nicola, do you want to?
Well, shall I start? I was going to say. Well, I think the obvious one is smaller royalties on the work that you sell. It's also a longer time from finishing your manuscript to publication. So yeah, as I said, 18 months for me. And of course, they retain the right to delay that if they think it might sell better at a later release time. I know a lot of books changed during COVID, that I think they changed the timeline on some of those launches. And they also had a glut of people finishing manuscripts and submitting them too. So their slush pile, as they call it, grew. They had a lot more to read and go through. But I don't know if that had any change to do with the contract for people. in the contract, they will say that it has to be published within a certain time frame, or then it's passed back to the author if you want to go ahead and do it on your own. But I don't know what kind of circumstances would cause that to happen. Perhaps the editing process, I'm not sure. But for me, it was 18 months. Communication can be very slow with publishers. So you're one of many authors. So in each publishing cycle, I think that our publicist has about 24 authors that she is working with. So you're not necessarily going to have immediate answers to some of your questions. So that can be frustrating for some people. And also because they're having meetings and making team decisions on things like titles and covers and that kind of thing. And then just overall control. You just, if you're self-publishing, it's totally up to you what you want that book to look like, and all of those things are within your control. So that's about it for challenges. I liked having my hand held, I must say, certainly with my first 2 books. So yeah.
And I agree with everything Nicola said. I had the same experience. It was, although I didn't feel like I didn't have any control, I felt like I did. I still felt like I had some control, but obviously a lot of things were taken out of my hands. And it was all the things that I'm glad were, like Nicola, I'm glad we're taking it out of my hands as a first-time author. The royalties is another thing. But I never, to be quite honest, I never thought about, particularly with my first book, I really just wanted the story out there. It was such an amazing story of community and, preserving heritage. I really wanted the story out there, and the royalties were kind of secondary. But yeah, and the communication. But when you realize how many authors they are, one editor is working with, you get to understand. But it can be frustrating. Or for me, it was kind of nerve-wracking, because are they going to get it ready? And is it moving along, or is it just sitting on their desk, or all of those things? But yeah, but absolutely way more positive than and that those are such minor negatives that it was wonderful.
Okay, Linda, no more questions have been added to the chat. So if you can ask our next question, that'd be great.
Well, I think it's wonderful that we're getting more comments on the positives of the challenges. This is lovely and inspirational, and I'm feeling really great about how things are going so far. So the next question is, how much, I think you've sort of answered this, but how much creative control did you have over such things as your title, layout, book cover, and pricing? So you talked a little bit about covers, but I wonder if you could address things like the title and the layout and the pricing as well. Nicola, I will start with you all the time.
Okay. Of course, with a novel, there's really not much as far as layout goes. It's just the book cover, and I kind of covered that before. But both of my books' titles were different to begin with, and they changed because the team had a meeting and decided that it didn't quite fit with the first novel. So my first novel's original title was Dead Reckoning, which is a sailing term. And there's a lot of sailing in the novel. So it really fit with what I wanted the book to, the theme, one of the themes of the book. But when it got to the marketing meeting time, they were concerned that it would signal the book was more of a murder mystery or a thriller, and it really isn't. I describe it as a kind of a suspense novel. If it had to fit into a genre, it would be suspense. So they asked me to come up with a list of alternate titles, and I sat down and went through the book. I tried to find phrases and things in there that might resonate. And in the end, what we chose was In the Wake. Again, it's not the kind of title that really sticks with you. And I'm constantly getting Google notifications that my novel has been mentioned, and it's to do with news articles that use the phrase "in the wake of da 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 da." Anyway, so I wish that I'd come up with something that was more precise. So when the second novel came around, I knew that my title was going to be a working title. So I called it No Shelter. It all takes place in an animal shelter. And my main character has had an early life where she has been overly sheltered. So there's also a bomb shelter in the book. So there's a lot of themes of shelter. And that made sense. But when we were getting to the marketing stage, I started looking into that title to see if it had been used before. And I found a number of books. Of course, a lot of them were to do with nonfiction, to do with animal shelters and so on. So I knew that they would be asking me if I had any other ideas. So again, I sat down and I came up with a number of different ideas. And I wanted the theme of Morse code. It's something that my main character uses to deal with anxiety. I wanted Morse code to be in there. So, and she's also working through something in her life. So she's trying to kind of understand the people around her and the world around her. She's 18. She's just getting out into the world. So we came up with the title of Decoding Dot Grey. And I was happy with that because I thought it stated the theme and has the name of the main character, and no one else is going to be using that title. So that's the one that stuck with them. And I'm quite happy with that title. What else now? I think I'm just looking at my own notes here. That's why I'm looking down. I just wanted to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Oh, you mentioned pricing. With novels, they're pretty basic. My first one was set at $22.95, and I think all of Nimbus's Vagrant Press imprint, I think all of their novels are exactly that same price. And my YA novel, the current novel, Decoding Dot Grey, is $21.95, which I think is a little on the upper end for YA novels. Because I buy some for my own son, they're usually somewhere in the teens. So, $15, $16. So mine's a little on the high side. But I didn't even get into pricing with them. It's not brought up at any meetings, and I just trust their judgment on that. Yeah.
And for me, the only change that was made, the working title for mine was The Little Lonely Lighthouse. And at a team meeting, they decided that they wanted it to be The Lonely Little Lighthouse. So there was a minor change there, which was fine by me. Layout, I had no say in. I did get to see the layout before it went to print. And it just made sense. Everything about the layout made sense. The design, the whole shebang. The book cover, once again, I had really no say in it. And thankfully I loved it from the very get-go. And the same thing with pricing. I know how much a children's hardcover picture book costs, and it's right in there with all the others. Was happy to leave that up to them as well.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, so Sarah made a comment that she had read the book that Nicola wrote, and that the title was perfect, Decoding Dot Grey. So she agreed that's the perfect title. And now we do have a couple of other questions. John is asking if you could comment about hardcover versus paperback. Anything, I'm not sure whether you've published in hardcover or paperback. Have you got any insight that you could share on that?
Certainly for novels, I don't really see Nimbus putting out hardcovers. They might do it with Leslie Crew, who's their kind of star author. She comes out with a novel a year. They're all bestsellers. I think I've got a copy of Nosy Parker, her early, I think it's the Arc that's actually a hardcover, but mostly it's soft covers. So I'm sure Lana would have, I think it's different for the children's books.
It is different for the children's books. There was never, it was from the get-go, they said they were going to publish it as a hardcover. And the reason behind that I was given was because they did want to sell it to schools. They did want to put it in school libraries. So where a lot of hands would be touching it. So the longevity of that book, was in hardcover, and I was thrilled because personally I love hardcover children's books as opposed to paperback. But I don't think I would have had a choice either way. I definitely wasn't given one. But like I said, I personally prefer hardcover.
And Sarah's asking about whether you had audiobook options.
I do, and there is something in the works for my second novel. I would like to record my first novel, but my second novel, they've asked me to go in and audition to do the role, because I would then get paid as an actor to do the audio version. But I've pointed out to them, I'm not sure that I am the right person for it, because my main character is 18. I don't think I sound like an 18-year-old, so it may end up being an actor, but
You
yeah.
look like an 18-year-old.
I love this camera. Thank you, Lana.
That was so well put. We do have one more question, but I think I'll hold the question if it's okay with you, John, because the question's going to get addressed as Linda asked it. And if it's not answered, I'll ask it at that time. So Linda, I think we're ready for the next question.
All right. So the next question is, what rights did you assign to your publisher?
Shall I go first again? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pretty standard contract. My international publication for print and electronic, I get a percentage of it all, but it's pretty detailed in the breakdown. So, it has not been an option yet, any kind of international publication. Then they have subsidiary rights. So book excerpts, book club adoptions, film and TV are all 60% to me and 40% to them. So that's about it.
And the same kind of rights and world rights and all of that you gave up. For me, it's a little different. It's 50-50 with the illustrator and the author. So 5%. 5% to each of us.
Okay, and Linda, I think you have our last question, which is on marketing.
Yes. In what way does your publisher assist with marketing your books, and how much of your marketing is up to you?
Okay, so for the publisher, of course, they track the sales for me. They plan and they pay for a book launch. So my last book launch was at a space where they could bring in the food, and they paid for drinks for people there. So they gave drink tickets out. They paid for the rental of the space, and it helped me, go and interview and find places that would be suitable. And for my first book launch, I actually shared it with my mentor, Carol Bruneau, because we both had books coming out. So we had a pretty fabulous book launch in this restaurant on the water, and it was very well attended. There was some standing room only, wonderful food, all of that covered by the publisher. So that's a big plus. They also purchase swag like bookmarks. For me, I got crow tattoos that are like the book's crow. They get you a big display poster so that you can take that to your events and so on. They'll get book bags. I think they might have done book bags for Lana. And they ask you what you might think would work for your particular readership. They held a workshop ahead of both books being published for the authors of that cycle of publication. And it was on social media marketing. So they talked to us about the kind of posts we could do, including excerpts and things like that in some of our posts, and just ways to continue to build your author platform. They all hold events at their space, because our publisher has a bookstore that is attached, and behind the bookstore is a space where they can do launches and events. So they'll hold things there that authors can attend. They'll have signings and readings and that sort of thing. They put forward your name to literary festivals and events. I went to, of course, the Toronto International Festival of Authors. I went to Fog Lit, which was a wonderful literary festival in New Brunswick. There are a couple of retreats that I did. One was called Read Treat, and it was in White Point Beach Lodge, which is this beautiful resort on the ocean here in Nova Scotia. So we were there for, I think it was 2 nights with people that love to read. And we held workshops and readings and dinners and so on with, I think it was 4 authors were there. And so we were able to socialize with readers, and it was really lovely. And then there was another one that I did at a place called Digby Pines, which is down in the Annapolis Valley here in Nova Scotia in the spring. And other than it raining the whole time, we had a wonderful time. Once again, we had things like wine and cheese and just socializing with readers. And then all of us gave a talk the next day on the Saturday to people. They do things like submitting your book for any award that they think fits. They did print advertising and TV advertising on my first book. Of course, I mentioned the ARCs earlier, and they submit the ARCs for reviews to NetGalley. There's also a local thing called Digitally Lit, which is all youth readers, and they have a social media presence. So they send your books off to these young readers, and they read the books, and then they create posts that are, speak directly to the audience that is their age. So it's pretty fabulous. And also they send out books to book bloggers. They also, for my first book, they also had a contingent of publishers from Germany and Europe. So they had an event where the authors could go and I think we each had a 5-minute pitch that we could put forward just to see if they might want to pick up rights to our books in different languages. I did my pitch and nothing, but I think that others did quite well. They also have their own book podcast called Book Me Podcast. So they have a good half-hour interview, and it's professional. It's done in a studio, and there's a professional editor that goes out and takes all my ums and ahs out and creates something lovely. And they also have the 2 publicists I mentioned earlier. We've got one here in the Atlantic region and one in Toronto. And they reshare anything that I create to amplify it. So that's what they do. As for me, I maintain my own website, which is, it's piggybacked on my photography website. So I have a photography and a book website in one because I'm too lazy to create 2 separate ones. I, of course, have built a social media platform with Facebook and Instagram. I keep my author headshot up to date, but that's, again, pretty easy since I'm a photographer. I arrange extra signings and readings on my own. So sometimes I go to bookstores if I have been able to build a relationship with them and do a reading. I'll go and visit the bookshops just to kind of build relationships there. And then just building a buzz around the events ahead of time. Like I created my own graphics for my last novel, similar to the book cover with short excerpts on them. And I tried to make them just a little bit funny and short so that people would want to reshare them. And also I had to provide a list of contacts to the publisher. So ahead of the launch, you have to kind of go through and mine all the names and addresses that you can think of, people that might like to attend, and invite them to the launch. I do interviews with papers, podcasts. I conduct the occasional workshop, book club appearances. I've done book giveaways. I keep a stack of my own books, which I purchase at cost from the publisher. And, around things like Valentine's Day or, Christmas, I will put up the offer on my local page for the neighborhood to see, because I've got at least 1,000 people in my local neighborhood that are interested in what locals make, because we like to buy local. So I'll put my books up there and offer it at a discount with, personalized message in the book. So I do things like that. And then the other thing is networking. I do on my own, which is I was on the board for the Writers Federation of Nova Scotia for 3 years, and I was also the chair of their fundraising committee. So I was building relationships there. I was doing headshot sessions for local authors, and none of that is really selling your book, but you're building that network of people, and it's a great thing to have people that you can reach out to for advice or even reading their books and elevating their books. One thing I love about being an author is that this is not a zero-sum game. You can go on and on about how much you love somebody else's book. It's not taking away from your book at all. If they like your book, they might also like this book and vice versa. So it's just, you're helping each other along. And I love that aspect of it. If you're signing next to an author, someone's not necessarily just going to buy their book or your book. They probably buy both. So it's wonderful that way. All the cross promotion of other authors. For my current book, it was mentioned in my bio that it's up for the White Pine Award, and that is a national award, which is a Reader's Choice Award with kids across the country. So mine is in the White Pine is for readers, I think 16 and up in those last couple of years of high school. So they have a big event coming up in February. So I'll be flying to Toronto for that. And, you know, there's something like 5,000 different vendors at this super conference. So I'll be there doing promotions. And then in May, I'll be back in Toronto again for the awards. So there are things like that they're not necessarily paid, but the publisher will pay for some of your expenses or maybe all of your expenses. And you just need to put in the time and the preparation to make your book stand out. So I think that probably covers a lot of it. Yeah. Sorry, I keep looking at my notes because I forget things so easily. So anyway, that's me.
And that is pretty much me too. The same kind of thing. We're with the same publisher, but one of the things I've learned, or one of the things that have come to me, even though I still feel very much that imposter syndrome, is that you make your book. You make or break your book. So you can do as little as you want, and with a traditional publisher, and your book, they will put your book in the store. They will put your book in the stores. They will send out to schools and awards and all of that. But you developing some kind of, like Nicola said, some kind of network and sharing and learning and going with things and doing some research behind different avenues of publicity and events and things like that. One of the things that I've done that I love, I'm a little free librarian here in Calgary, and I actually had my Calgary launch at our little free library, and we've done that with some of the local authors here. And once again, it's that network of authors in the area and the other authors who have done book launches at our little library are self-published. So, and we did a lot of promotion, and I learned a lot about that, about, how much promotion you have to do and the costs involved in that, because my publisher I didn't approach the publisher, to be quite honest about that. That was something that we do here. Yeah, just putting yourself out there, which is awfully hard, and talking about your book. I find it very difficult to talk about my book, not because of the subject matter, but because I think like, oh, I'm making people listen to my book, or listen about my journey or whatever. But it's really important, and having a network of like-minded people, whether that be like Nicola said, book clubs that you get to talk to and get feedback from, or fellow authors, or just readers in general. It's just an amazing thing for marketing. So the marketing that Nimbus has done for my book, they've been very open to anything that I've suggested. I had many this summer that I had done all the legwork for and done all the actual dates for, but they were more than willing to, if I asked them, could you do lighthouse shaped cookies? Do you have anybody that that has lighthouse shaped cookies that I could have at the museum where I'm doing a reading? The publicist, Kate, was phenomenal. She knew someone, and suddenly I had a box full of lighthouse shaped cookies to give out at the event. So those kind of things were definitely so helpful. And the budget isn't unlimited. The budget, I don't think the budget certainly wasn't, and I definitely, but they were pretty open to anything within reason that I asked, as far as, you know, the monetary value went.
Okay, John did ask earlier, prior to your sharing, about marketing, and just in case you have something to add to this question, you may have already answered it. He said he would like to know how much time is expected of the author at in-person events in the USA and Canada. Oh, sorry, doubling, that's the second question. We'll come back to the other one, John. So how much time is expected at author in-person events in the USA and Canada? I assume he means a publisher's expectation.
I never felt there was any time expectation on me for any event. Any event that I did was definitely done, you know, me knowing that it had been scheduled for 7 to 9 or 7 to 8 or whatever hour, 2-hour thing was, but it always goes longer because you always get into great conversations about books in general and your book and your process. But I never felt there was any time expectation with Nimbus. And I don't know if Nicola has a different experience, but for me, there was I never felt any pressure or expectation time-wise.
No, and it's certainly not contracted. It's they are very specific when they're scheduling you. Sometimes they'll say you're going to do a half-hour reading, but to be available for signings afterwards. So I would say 2 hours for any event minimum. And if you're staying longer, it's because you're selling more books, so you're happy. Yeah.
And in case you have something to add, John had also asked, do publishers do all of the social media promotions, or do they expect the author to do most of it, or is it a blend?
No, it's definitely a blend. And I think that it depends on the author themselves, but I'm quite comfortable with the social media aspect. And because I have photos, I'll try to take photos at events and so on to be able to amplify my publisher's social media presence too, whenever I can. So even if I'm not at the event or not in the event, I will take pictures and share them. So it's really just, you're helping each other along as much as you can.
Yeah, and same for me, you know, and always tagging them in any post or, you know, making sure that everyone knows who my publisher is. But I've never felt any pressure or expectation about social media as well. It was always whatever you're comfortable with, basically. Certainly how I felt. And once again, any promotion that you do does promote them, does promote other authors. I also have on my Facebook and Instagram, I have a book review component. So I tend to concentrate on fellow Atlantic Canadian authors. So, you know, that helps as well because I tag the publisher, all of that kind of stuff. But no, never felt any pressure or expectation. And definitely it's a blend. They, you know, if anything comes in across their desks about the Lonely Little Lighthouse, then, you know, they'll post it, they'll publish it, they'll get the word out.
Okay, I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this one. It's a little bit specific, but I will throw it out there. His concern is that we as authors, many of us here are in Panama. So his question in relation to time was concerning travel from Panama to the USA to events. Would there be a certain expectation?
I think that would just be a case-by-case basis, depending on the event that you're going to be at. If you're going to a signing, then certainly bookstores, it seems to be a 2-hour period for that kind of thing. And for readings, if you're there with other authors, they sometimes will only give you a 5 or 10 minute time slot, and then maybe a Q&A period of an hour. So usually a couple of hours is about right.
And as far as the travel expenses go, I think, you know, they either lay out exactly how much they're going to, or if you approach them and say, hey, I've been invited to Read by the Sea, or I've been invited to this festival with the book, Is there, can you help out with that? Or is that fully on me? And then you have that conversation. And I definitely feel like that is something that I can have the conversation with Nimbus with. Whether they tell me, oh, nope, sorry, you're completely on your own or not, is neither here nor there. But I definitely feel like I can have a conversation with them around anything to do with that. And the same thing with Nicola. A signing at a bookstore or wherever, a museum, is usually 2 hours. But if you say, I've only got an hour on that day, it's not, I've never felt any pressure. I never felt any pressure with the marketing of this book from Nimbus at all.
Okay, so our last question.
If I could, oh, sorry, could I just add on to that, please? Lana, because you live in Calgary and Nimbus is based in Nova Scotia. And so did they support you to come and spend, I don't know, a long period of time during your launch in Nova Scotia so that you could work with established vendors and bookstores that they work with? Or how did that work?
So they helped me once I was there. I am from Nova Scotia, so we do go every summer anyway. So my husband and I picked up the cost because it was a cost. The flights were a cost that we would have had anyway. I didn't ask Nimbus to pay for the flights. So I can't say whether they would have or not. But once I was on the ground in Nova Scotia, Kate, the publicist there, was phenomenal. And I had already kind of pre-booked things, and we have family there, and so all of those kind of costs, we kind of sucked them up ourselves, like we kind of did that ourselves. But once again, the geography doesn't seem to be an issue as far as promoting. Thankfully, there's the internet, Facebook, all of those things. And like I said, we go down every summer. So I'm planning to go down again this summer. So I will once again be doing some promo and marketing and signings and all of that kind of thing. So, and still, Kate will definitely be at the forefront for arranging those.
Okay, so for our last question from a participant, Celia has asked, besides the traditional meta platforms, are there other social media platforms that either of you use? For example, YouTube, Pinterest, etc.
I haven't used Pinterest as an author, but YouTube a little bit, just when I wanted to create my own, and I didn't mention, actually, I created my own, what do you call it?
Channel.
Book trailer. I created a book trailer
book
for my very first novel. And it's just simpler to load that onto YouTube and then create a link from Facebook and Twitter and so on. I don't use Twitter that much. I find Twitter seems to be just a conversation between authors rather than authors talking to readers. It is helpful because we do promote one another that way. But my publisher had done some looking into the statistics on social media, and they said your readers are on Facebook. So that is where I tend to put most of my effort. I use Instagram, but it's in conjunction with Facebook, so it tends to post to both at the same time. So YouTube, definitely, but YouTube in conjunction with Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
And for me, it's the same. The publisher said Facebook was where I was getting most of my traffic. So, and like Nicola, it's linked, my Instagram and my Facebook. Twitter, I do have a Twitter account, and I do sometimes visit there. I will check in every now and then, or if I get some kind of notification, I will, but I'm not active on Twitter. And I have done YouTube in my book reviewer form, but not as an author. But it is something that I'd like to explore further, because I think YouTube is a good platform. There are a lot of young readers on there. Hopefully not the young readers at the picture book level, but parents are there, and so yes, YouTube, and I do believe that it is a valuable marketing tool.
Okay, that's it for our questions, Linda.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking time out of your busy lives to join us here. It's my first ride-along workshop as well. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to learn more about traditional publishing, and my mind's spinning now, as I'm sure everybody's is, with all sorts of ideas on directions and things to explore. And it sounds like a really positive experience overall. So thank you so much for sharing.
And certainly if anyone wants to get in touch, or if you think of any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Can reach me on Facebook or Instagram or on my website, which my website is woefully inadequate. I need to do, that's one of my 2023 goals too, is to be more active on my actual website, but definitely would love to hear from everyone. I want to thank everyone for listening to me ramble on and on about my experience.
Thank you also for inviting me. And it's been fun to listen to Lana's contributions as well, because it is a different journey. And same publisher, different journey. And I one day would like to put out a children's book myself. So I'm always curious. And again, you can reach me at my website, which is oddly called snickerdoodle.ca. It's like the cookie. Or I'm sure that there will be links and ways to reach me through Linda and Lindy. So I'd be happy to answer any questions in detail if you have more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you both, Nicola and Lana, for being there. Once we post our discussion to YouTube, you're welcome to continue the conversation with questions or comments there, or subscribe to channels of any of the authors. You'll also find the bios for our authors today in the description, and their contact information, so you can access them there. Thank you for listening in on our discussion. Thank you to both guests who were both helpful information, but also were so very real. It really helps us in our process to feel like we can identify with you. And Nicola and Lana, thank you. And everyone, keep reading and writing.